I got to see a movie last night that I thought I'd never see, but this film opened this Friday. We're talking October the 11th as of this recording, and it is called The Apprentice, not the reality TV show starring Donald Trump, but the movie directed by Iranian Dutch director Ali Abbasi. And it stars my man Bucky the Winter Soldier playing Donald Trump himself, Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn, and Maria Bakalova, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, she stars as Ivana Trump. My understanding is that studios were afraid to release this, or no one was afraid. No one wanted to take the film and put it out there because of the lashback or from certain political parties. But it did get released. It got released, ironically, 25 days roughly before the election. So I'm not sure what to think there. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But anyway, I got to see it. The movie documents Donald Trump's life from when he starts to get into real estate by buying I'm assuming one of his first buildings, up to the point where he is beginning to work on The Art of the Deal, his book. So the movie starts off with a young Donald Trump who is just beginning his foray as an entrepreneur into real estate in an attempt to purchase his first building. And he's doing this, and this is a running theme throughout the first half of the film. He's doing this kind of to get his chops, to show his dad that he is worthy of getting into the real estate business and making his own deals. Because the movie portrays Trump's father as like a Lothario, one who he's not the most loving person to his children. And Donald, as well as Donald's older brother, Fred Trump, they are always trying to prove themselves to their father. And they always feel like, at least the older brother does, they feel like they fall short. So we see Donald Trump was motivated not only he wants to make some bones in the real estate industry to prove something to his father, but the problem is that the Trump organization, under his dad's leadership, they are facing charges for discriminating against black renters in their apartment properties. And this is something that we've seen documented today, that it did happen in the past. So that's where the film picks up. Now, let me back up. I don't know what this film is based on. I do recall that there was a title card that came up at the beginning of the movie that implied that it was based on true events, but some events were dramatized or fictionalized for dramatic effect. What was really interesting is that at the beginning of the film, we see a young Donald Trump who is somewhat naive, somewhat green, it appears. He's not the Donald Trump that we know today. He seems like he doesn't wield much control over anything, and that makes sense because he's new, he's young to the game. But it was still just kind of jarring to see Donald Trump in his 20s, even being so young, being so drugged by the nose. And we see brilliant scenes where he has to go and collect rent from tenants, and they give him hell. One guy throws a pot of boiling water at him. You almost feel for the guy having to go through just collecting money. He takes a lot of abuse from the tenants and from his dad. So again, they set up this character almost to a fault where it's going to be clear that there's going to be a change, as we know there must be a change, because I've never seen Trump portrayed this way. So maybe it was a little overdone with how naive he was and how innocent Sebastian Stan played him, or maybe how the script wrote him in the first half. But it was pretty interesting to see that type of portrayal. Now, we do get kind of small, subtle hints of the Trump that is to be in the future because, as I mentioned, or as I implied, Fred Trump, the patriarch, belittles both of his sons. There's a scene at a dinner table where his older son, Fred Trump, who is an airline pilot, is just scathed in front of guests during this dinner, and it's pretty brutal. But then Trump also is belittled by his dad, and unfortunately, the only outlet Trump has to get his frustrations out for how he feels diminished by his father is on the tenants that he's collecting money from. So even though we see him in this lowly state, going around door to door, knocking on doors to collect rent money, he does lash out kind of cruelly in some cases, but you kind of understand it at that point because, unless you've had to chase money like I have as a freelancer in the past, I kind of identify with that. Surprisingly, I identified with this portrayal of Donald Trump to a certain degree. Enter Roy Cohn, who will play an indelible role in Trump's life in creating the personality that we know today. He meets Roy Cohn at a nightclub, and we kind of get a insight into who Roy Cohn is instantaneously in the scene because Trump meets him while he is holding court in this nightclub at a corner table with the likes of Fat Tony Salerno, Carmine Galante. We also are hinted that Roy Cohn is living perhaps a double life because he has one of his gay lovers there at the table with him. So we also learn that Roy Cohn is a closeted gay man. So at that time, that was pretty frowned upon. And it's clear that Trump is very uncomfortable being around Roy. But initially he's uncomfortable. But we see the Trump that we'll come to know that he is very transactional. And he knows that Roy is the only man he can turn to help his family beat the discrimination charges. So he seeks Roy out definitively to get his help.
Hello, this is Donald Trump from Mr. Cohn. Thank you so much.
Donald who?
Again, in the beginning of this film, it's interesting to see a naive, somewhat innocent Trump, working with a man, an attorney, Roy Cohn, who is a monster in court, who will stoop to blackmailing people that he has to go up against in court, blackmailing people so he can get Trump lower taxation on building permits and taxes on his building in New York. And we see Trump kind of recoil at Roy's tactics. However, Trump reaps the benefits of Roy's horrendous behavior. And so that sets Trump on a trajectory to learn what it takes to get ahead, as nefarious as those means may be. At this point, the movie kind of plays like one of my favorite, if not my favorite film of all time, Wall Street, where we have the young ingenue Bud Fox who meets Gordon Gekko, and Gordon takes him down a dark road. It plays very much like that with when Trump meets Roy Cohn. And I felt like I was seeing some familiar beats. Not that it was derivative, but it just felt familiar. And I'm like, okay, I recognize this. I see the path that this is going to take with these characters. The movie sort of plays like a Cliff Notes version of Trump's life. It kind of dashes from event to event to event. From the beginning, like I said, where they're fighting discrimination charges, to where Trump wants to build Trump Tower and he uses Roy to blackmail people into giving him lower tax rates to build, into his marriage with Ivana. And that pairing between Trump and Ivana was also another part of the film that I'm assuming it happened this way, but I find it hard to believe. What do I mean? Basically that Trump spots Ivana at a modeling event. She is from Czechoslovakia, I believe, and she's a supermodel there. But she's over here in the States promoting something. Trump is taken by her. And the next couple scenes, we see Trump, who is a wealthy man at this point, pursuing Ivana, and Ivana being a little coy and being very standoffish with him. These scenes portray maybe a little bit of, I guess you could say, a little bit of stalking with Trump, but he really comes off as genuinely expressing an emotion for this woman, which is not something that I attribute to the Trump of today, who has had numerous marriages thus far, right? These are sweet scenes where you're like, could Trump have possibly been like this when he was younger? Did he actually have a heart? Now, having said that, subsequently, after the scenes of their courtship, and we come across a scene where it's established that they're going to get married, and there's a scene that follows after that that is played for laughs. And it is kind of funny, but it's also very tragic. It's the scene that I think demonstrates Trump's beginning to go over to the dark side. He mentions to Roy Cohn that he's getting married, and Roy says, "Oh, you need someone to protect you. You need me to help you out with this. What are you, crazy?" And the scene that follows is one where Roy, Trump, and Ivana are negotiating a prenup. And it is that scene that says, okay, now we're starting that journey down the dark path. That scene kind of ushers in the second half of the movie. Now, understand, this movie is 2 hours long, and it pretty much is divided. It felt like it was divided evenly between young Trump, innocent, naive, to the Trump that we know now. And that scene with the negotiating of the prenup, that scene seemed to be the line of demarcation, where we got a very harsh 180-degree turn to the ruthless, I'll say unethical Trump that is in the papers today. In this second half of the film, we see the marriage start to dissolve between Ivana and Trump. We see how he is only casually involved with Don Jr. as a toddler. And we see his diminishing of Ivana, possibly because, I read into it that he was a little jealous of some of the attention that she was getting when she was having people come to Trump Tower to see how she was going to design it and lay it out. And we get a scene that is the culmination of their toxic relationship, where he reveals that he is not attracted to her. And this is a minor spoiler, there is a very brutal and somewhat graphic sexual assault scene. And I remember this was talked about in some of the press reviews I heard about this film. And it's not, you don't see anything, or there's nothing gratuitous about it, but you do see something of a sexual nature, and it's very unsettling. The film does something that I don't know if it was obligated to do because it actually happened, but as we see Donald Trump develop into the person that he is today, we see the film does little things that are kind of like a wink wink to us, the audience, to say, hey, you know what this is, right? This is what leads Trump to be what he is today. A lot of in jokes with the film predicting the future or showing us what the future is. And I don't really like that kind of stuff. But again, maybe this film had to do that because it actually happened. Perfect example is there's a scene where Barbara Walters interviews Trump in his condo or his home. And she asks him a question, something along the lines of, if you ever got out of real estate, maybe you could run for political office. And he says, maybe I should. And, did that interview happen? I don't know. But whether it happened or not, I just found it to be, okay, a little eye rolling. And then there's another scene where he's handed a button while he's in his Trump Tower office. And it says something like Ronald Reagan says, "Let's make America great again." And then the camera zooms in on Sebastian Stan's face while he smiles. And I'm like, okay, we get it. Make America great again, MAGA. Okay, we understand. I'm just not a big fan of that stuff. But again, I guess it had to be done. I just wish it had been done with a little bit of a lighter touch. The performances in this film are all great for the most part. Sebastian Stan as Trump, what he does a magnificent job. I gotta applaud the makeup people, the makeup and hair. There are some scenes where I thought the makeup was caked on a little bit too much with Sebastian Stan, but there's some scenes, man, that when you look at the screen, when you look up, he looks just like Donald Trump. They got the hair right. One thing I really liked about Sebastian Stan's performance is that he doesn't try to do Trump all the way. He doesn't try to do the voice, which had he done that, I think it would have come off as just another Saturday Night Live 2-hour sketch. So I appreciated that he didn't do that. And again, at the beginning, he doesn't come off as Donald Trump at all. In the second half of the film, we start to see him employ a little bit more Trumpism, a little bit more of the hand motions, the things like that, the lip pouting, but he still does not go for the Trump voice, which again is greatly appreciated. He just does kind of like a thick Queen's accent. And that's all it took. And I bought him as Trump all the way. So I really appreciated his, I'm not going to say subtle performance, because he really does give it his all, but he doesn't do a lame impersonation of Trump, which I greatly appreciated. Jeremy Strong from the HBO show, or Max show, Succession, plays Roy Cohn. And I've seen where he's getting praised for his performance. And I'm not going to say it's a bad performance, but for me, it got a little grating after a while, because it, in my opinion, was completely one note. It's like he was imitating Roy Cohn as though he, the actor, Jeremy Strong, latched onto one tick or one aspect of Roy Cohn's presentation. And that's what we see throughout the whole film. And it got a little annoying and grating after a while. It's like, surely Roy Cohn smiled every now and then, or surely he softened up a little bit every now and then. I believe Jeremy played him just kind of the same timbre the whole film. Now, later on in the film, Roy undergoes a life crisis. I'm not going to spoil too much. I mean, you can read the history. But at that point, we see a little bit of some nuance to the character other than what he had been portraying throughout the film up to that point. There's a scene where he and Trump have a falling out. And for the first time, we see Jeremy Strong do something different with the character. He comes out of that one particular character tick, and it's an engrossing scene. And I think I get a sense a lot of it was ad-libbed, and that added like an urgency to the scene. It was a great scene. Maria Bakalova, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, she does a great job as Ivana Trump. I had no complaints about her performance, particularly the one scene where, as I said, there was a sexual assault. That was brave, going through that scene, and I got to think she probably only allowed them to do that to get a couple takes of that at best. Just on a side note, the movie also would have us believe, and I'm not saying it's not true, that, and this is a minor spoiler, that Donald Trump had liposuction. And by the way, that's another thing about Sebastian Stan's performance. It looks like he gained significant weight to play Donald Trump in the second half of the film, when he becomes more of a mogul and he starts to put on weight. I don't know if there's a scene where, and this gets to what I was talking about, the liposuction, where Donald Trump in this film is reported to have had liposuction, and we see the doctor squeezing Trump's gut. Now, I don't know if that was Sebastian Stan or a body double, but it looks like he did put on weight for the role. The film also would have us believe that Trump at some point had a bald spot, and they graphically show the doctor or the surgeon cutting out the bald spot, pulling the skin together and stapling it on top of his head. And it was a cringy scene. I'm getting kind of nauseous just thinking about it. So although the film seemed like it kind of was a little slapdash and going through Trump's life, and by the way, it ends really abruptly. If you remember the Sopranos series finale, how that ended, it was almost along the lines of that. We see Sebastian Stan giving us all the Donald Trumpisms, the way he talks, the way he thinks. He does nail Trump, but again, not going into comical territory by giving us the Trump voice impersonation, and then the scene just stops. It goes to black, and we get credits. And my wife saw it with me. We were like, is that it? Okay. So it ends a little abruptly. It's also shot it looks like it was shot, a lot of it was shot on mini DV, which is a digital tape format that was around in the late 90s. Very grainy, at least at the first half of the film. I don't know if that's to portray or to be a metaphor for the young Trump in the 70s. I didn't notice this so much when we got to the second half, when Trump is already ensconced in Trump Tower and he is a mogul at that point. But yeah, It has a very gritty feel to it, which didn't detract from it, but it was kind of in your face with this film. It had the aesthetic of an art film to some degree. But I was not happy with the way it ended. I was hoping they would at least take it to him coming down that escalator in 2015 or whenever that was. And I could see ending it there. It would have been great if they could have secured the rights to some of the footage during that first presidential run. But I suppose they were not either allowed to do that. I know that Trump's people tried to censor the film, so it's very unlikely that they could have employed some of that footage. But be that as it may, I'm going to give this film, based on the performances mainly, particularly Sebastian Stan's performance, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 reels. I do recommend you go see it. I don't know how longer it's going to be in theaters. I don't know how longer it's going to be around, because I know Trump's entourage, his people, they are decrying the film left and right. So who knows how long it's going to be available. So go check it out. Hopefully it's playing in your area. Once you see it, come on back and leave some comments. And if you're still sitting there listening to me as I conclude this review, that must mean you enjoyed what I had to say. So do me a favor, click subscribe and leave your comments below. All right, everybody, that's the Martini. I will see you at the next film review. Thank you very much. Take care.